So let's end this lecture on one last haiku from Basho, dated 1694, the year that Basho died. And it's, again, a wonderful poem, another one of my favorites. And my reading of the poem here has been assisted by a few commentaries, most specifically the commentary of Robert Aitken in A Zen Wave, Basho's Haiku in Zen. But the poem shows Basho, as usual, in the midst of traveling on one of his many pilgrimages late in his life. He has awoken before dawn, likely, and he's picking his way along a mountain path in the cool early morning when the light is dim and the sun has yet to rise. On the slopes of the mountain are groves of plum trees that are in fragrant blossom, and this environmental detail provides the seasonal cue for early spring. Basho's walking along in the bitter freezing early morning, lost in the pervading scent of plum blossoms, readying himself in the depths of his mind for the appearance of the sunrise. And pop, the sun appears. It appears outside in the world, but also inside his mind at the same time. And Basho realizes it. He manifests its popping and its appearance in this minimalist poem. The event happens in his mind and the world of reality at the same time. Notice how the word pop is the action itself. There are no descriptive terms here. There's no terms that take us outside of that moment of action. And the word pop names the action, indicating that the poet is experiencing nature rather than observing it from a distance. Now, it's also worth noting here that the scent of plum blossoms in the cold of early spring has been a favorite of Japanese and Chinese poets from ancient times. Dogen, the Japanese Buddhist priest, writer, poet, philosopher, once wrote of enlightenment in relationship to the cold early spring morning and the scent of plum blossoms. So Basho is working within a tradition of thinking about the relationship between plum blossoms and moments of enlightenment. But the second segment of the poem is the most interesting because it begins with the Japanese word nado, which is translated here as pop. But in Japanese, the word nado is much more onomatopoeic. Pop is the best equivalent the translator could come up with. And in English, these kind of words are often seen as the province of children's language or seen kind of in a trivial fashion. But in Japanese, these kind of sound effects, these examples of using or realizing a sound through the action of the word, nado, were much more common and popular. So the ultimate subject of this poem, in conclusion, is the pop, but the pop reveals the mountain's path. The appearance and revealing of the mountain's path in the midst of the aroma and light of the plum blossoms and the sunrise. So in Zen Buddhism, realization comes suddenly. One might even describe true realization as being slight and shallow. It never comes on gradually. And in Zen, true realization always arrives with a pop. And it is with this pop, we might say, that Basho emerges in this poem from his utter absorption in the scent of the plum blossoms into the world of light, the world of the path, the world of his journey. In this broad respect, the poem follows the same pattern of Zen practice: concentration, realization, and personalization. Concentration, focus, and awareness is what permits a moment of realization to happen, the possibility of satori or enlightenment. But in order to reach maturity, this moment of satori or enlightenment has to experience another stage, which is the stage of personalization. Realization is put into personal practice. And we can see this activity, this development in Basho's poem. He is lost in the fragrance of the plum blossoms in a state of concentration. Then he pops up with the sun into a moment of realization. And finally, in the last stage, he pushes along his own path, his own personalization of the way. So it's a great poem to end this lecture on the relationship between Basho's poetry and Zen Buddhism. And as I mentioned earlier, Basho is known as bringing Zen Buddhist philosophy into poetry in a really intimate way, a way that changed literature in Japan as well as the rest of the world for centuries.